Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. All right. I wrote this out so I wouldn't get too crazy, but mainly I wanted to recognize the fact that last week Michelle led off the month with a good presentation demonstrating the value of the accompaniment model as it relates to outreach mission efforts of all kinds, including what we may be considering here locally, although it has applied to international things as well. And then the remaining 4 Sundays of January are going to be devoted to some exploration of possible local responses and local engagement, and related to homelessness and housing insecurity or instability, whatever you want to call it. And Trinity's Homeless Steering Team has organized these 4 weeks, and kind of in the spirit of learning, as well as approaching this with both patience and practicality for how we may somehow become engaged ourselves in an effective way, and not get too discouraged by the immensity of the problem, but recognize the work that people that we'll be hearing from have already accomplished and where we can maybe plug in. And today we welcome Trisha Kaufman, who's in the top part of my screen, and she's from Solid Ground and has served over 20 years there as executive director, and pretty much guided housing and related support services for families that have been experiencing the trauma of coming out of homelessness and looking for a path out of that. And that's expanded quite a bit over the years, but she's overseen many innovative programs that deal with needs beyond just the physical shelter. And she'll talk more about that as part of her background. But we've had some challenges at Solid Ground with regard to COVID, just like everybody else has. But they have not been resting quietly over at Solid Ground. It's been a very busy year with regard to planning for both physical and program expansions, and then a recent large grant, as you'll hear about, also has worked into the mix. So what else did I want to say that was really important? I think that's the bulk of it, and Penny has gone over the logistics about questions if you have them, and Trisha has a lot of experience dealing with Zoom meetings, at which I've been at a few, and she keeps people pretty well behaved. So see if you can test her a little bit if you want to, but let's welcome her and give her a good listen for the next few minutes.
Morning, everyone. I can get everybody to behave but you, Jeff. All right. So thank you for having me this morning. I'm excited to be here. I am going to share my screen. Hopefully technology will smile on us. All right. Can you guys see the PowerPoint? Great. So Solid Ground has been around since 1987. So we celebrated our 30th year pretty recently. And as Jeff said, our mission is to prevent and end homelessness for families with children. And we do that through providing housing, resources, and opportunity. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about our programs in general, and then talk about some exciting new opportunities that we have coming down to serve Washington County. Oh, it is not going forward. Hold on. Let me see. For some reason, the screen is not advancing.
Maybe just on share and then reshare again.
Yeah. Yep. Again, thank you. You know, I had this happen not that long ago with a Rotary group, And what I can do is have it in the view where you guys can see what I'm seeing. You know what I mean? So can you guys see this one? Yes? Okay. So we'll try it that way, see if this works. So unfortunately, you won't see. Let me see if I can make this smaller. No. Okay. So Solid Ground currently has 6 supportive housing programs in Ramsey, Washington County, and they serve about 500 adults and children a year. About a third, 2/3 of our participants are children, and about a third of our children, more than a third, are very young, under the age of 5. We do serve mostly people of color. I'm sure it's no surprise to you. You probably have already heard that we experience significant racial disparities in homelessness, particularly for African Americans and American Indians. Those populations experience homelessness at a much higher rate than the general Minnesota population, which speaks to the existence and persistence of discrimination in housing, as well as difficulties with income and education. Most of the families we serve are very low income. You know, they are below 200% of federal poverty, and actually most are not even at the level of federal poverty, which is quite low. And Washington County is actually has the highest rates of rents, the highest rental costs in the whole state of Minnesota. So it is not easy to find an affordable unit in Washington County. We have 3 site-based programs. We have our East Metro Place programs in White Bear Lake, and that's where our main office is located. We're right next to Century College. And in those programs, we have pretty intensive services, partly because we are on site and we have an opportunity to offer all kinds of services, including different classes around skill building, after school tutoring, things like that. Obviously, with the pandemic, that has changed a lot, and we've been providing more of our services virtually, connecting with families by phone, by text. We use Microsoft Teams, which is part of our work platform. And we've actually used some of our COVID response grants to purchase laptops and hotspots for families who need help with technology, so that whether it's to connect with us or with school or their own work, we can make sure that they are not getting too isolated. And then the other 3 programs that we offer are scattered site housing programs. And that's where we are looking for units out in the community and landlords who will rent to families with less than perfect rental histories. And that is a really tough job to do. As I said, Washington County in particular has very high rent rates. But 2, I think that regardless of the community that you're in, when you have a history of evictions or even a minor criminal history, it's very difficult to find a landlord who will rent to you because there's so little housing and so much demand for that housing. But in our Home Again, Home Safe, and Homework Starts with Home programs, we are providing rent directly to landlords to help make it affordable for families, and also to encourage landlords to take a chance on our families. And then we bring our services to those families. Oh, I forgot to mention Homefront. So Homefront is our 3rd site-based program, and that is located in Maplewood, and we serve military veterans and their families in supportive housing in Maplewood. And veterans, again, you may already know, also experience a higher rate of homelessness due to the difficulties with returning to civilian life for many people, whether it's a physical injury, mental health issues, PTSD, things like that. As I mentioned, we have a range of support services for parents. You know, Jeff talked about the accompaniment model where, you know, we are walking beside someone. It's not our job to fix them or save them, but to help them decide what their goals and needs are, and then be able to walk beside them and help them meet those goals and needs. One of the things that we offer that is more unique than most is our dialectical behavior therapy skills training, DBT skills training. That's it's actually a mental health program, but we use it as a life skills training program where we teach mindfulness and other skills for parents to, you know, when you've been in the kind of situations that many of our families have been in, you know, they might be fleeing domestic violence. They might have experienced, you know, significant trauma. It's, you know, not knowing where they're going to live, you know, maybe feeling unsafe most of the time. You know, they're kind of always got their gloves on, if you will. And you know, the skills that have helped keep them safe and to survive until this point aren't necessarily the best skills to help them be good neighbors, good employees, good advocates for their children in the school district. So DBT can help teach them how to manage their emotions, teach them how to make healthy decisions for themselves and their kids. And it can really be transformational for the folks who work the program. We've heard so many good things from our residents who have participated in DBT that it really, really helped them kind of step back and assess, you know, their life and where they're at and how they are and how they want to be, and start making those changes. We also do a lot of programming for children, everything from helping them be ready for school every year, you know, with supplies and things. I talked about our out of school tutoring program. That's where we pair community volunteers one-on-one with children to help them work on their homework and build their reading and math skills and really just develop a love of learning. And those mentors, those tutors really become more like mentors for our kids. It's much more than just homework help. Those kids really, really benefit from having a caring adult in their life who cares about them and who wants to see them succeed, and makes a world of difference. And we are missing our tutors because right now, you know, almost everything is virtual. We can have a couple people on site at a time, but for the, you know, we're trying to be safe for the kids and the volunteers and our staff. So we're trying to find different ways to make sure that kids still get what they need. We also have a summer camp because, again, kids don't always have the opportunities to have fun, structured activities in the summer. And so we can do that for them. So whatever it is, we're there to help. So with that, we have exciting news to share. It sounds like you may already know this from Jeff or others at Trinity, or from the news. We got a transformational grant from Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. His Day One Families Fund in December awarded us a $1.25 million grant. And we are going to use it across 3 years for 3 programs. The first is to expand our Homework Starts with Home program. So that's one of our scattered site housing programs, and that's where we're working with families through the school districts. The school district social workers or homeless liaisons, they're called McKinney-Vento liaisons, will refer families to us who are either at risk of losing their housing or have already lost their housing. And, you know, kids can't learn if they don't have a stable home. right? And so it's all about making sure that those kids have stability so that they can be the students that they need to be and focus on their learning. And we have had such tremendous success in suburban Ramsey County with this program. And right now, the one we have now that serves more suburban county school is funded, the rents are funded primarily by the state. And then we've done some private fundraising to support the services and the staff to provide those services. And we've been super successful in finding housing for folks or preventing housing loss for them, and then, you know, helping them regain stability and keeping those kids on track. And so we had actually partnered with Washington County about a year ago to ask to the state to help us expand this program into Washington County. We weren't successful. You know, as you can imagine, those dollars are highly competitive since it's a statewide program. And but when we got this grant, we thought, you know, where are the gaps? Where can we do the most good? And expanding Homework Starts with Home immediately came to mind. We already have some of those relationships. We know how effective it can be. Let's bring that into Washington County. So now before we could serve families in Oakdale because they're part of the North St. Paul Maplewood School District, but now we can go throughout Oakdale, you know, Stillwater, Forest Lake, Matamidi, South Washington County, all of those kind of metro area school districts will be able to serve through this program. One thing about these funds, they cannot be used for prevention. And so in Ramsey County, we've been able to do a lot of good work preventing homelessness. With these dollars, they're really focused on housing, shelter, and diversion. So since we can't use these funds for prevention, we decided to take a portion of it. So we had some conversations with folks in the county, including Jenny Mason, who Jeff talked about a little bit ago. And they identified diversion as a real gap in the county. So what is diversion? Diversion is when you try to keep families or individuals out of shelter or unsheltered situations. So, you know, the rest stop on I-94, if you're not aware, has a fairly significant number of people staying in their cars there over time. Parks, other situations, parking lots. There's that skating rink in Stillwater by Lakeview Hospital. Last year, or actually, I guess maybe it was 2 years ago now, I was part of the what's called the PIT count, the point in time count for homelessness. And, you know, we were told there was a woman who sleeps there every night in her car. She would have been someone that we would identify for diversion. And it's about getting them into housing or out of an unsheltered situation, but without having to go into shelter. Because you know what? Shelter's expensive. And shelter isn't particularly safe right now. You know, any kind of congregate living has some risks with it right now. As hard as shelters work toward providing those safe conditions, and they're doing a great job, it's still not ideal, right? So how can we help a family avoid shelter or having to go into a car or onto the street? And so Ramsey County has been doing diversion for quite a few years now with a lot of success. They've got like a 86% housing rate, and we can do that too in Washington County. And so what we hope to do is create a pilot with the county, the host team, the housing outreach and support team, they call themselves HOST, with St. Andrews Community Resource Center, you know, maybe Valley Outreach, Salvation Army, whoever wants to be part of this pilot, we welcome them. And then Solid Ground can provide any dollars that are needed to help those families avoid shelter. Because we really, you know, we don't do shelter, we do housing. And so we tried to look at and filling the gaps in the community, you know, where's that funding or service most needed, but also recognizing that it doesn't have to be just us, right? Partnerships are important and they're effective. And if we're going to really make a difference in the community, we want to work with others to do that. And so our goal is to help create this pilot program, show how well it works, and then be able to hand it over to the county or to another partner to continue. Because these dollars are one-time dollars, you know, the money will be gone in 3 years. And we want to be able to show that we made an impact in those 3 years. And, you know, how can we sustain that work? You know, maybe hopefully there'll be an opportunity to continue Homework Starts with Home, but through state funding. You know, hopefully they'll be able to continue the diversion program, but through county funding or other sources of funding. And then the third thing that we want to do, and something that we've talked about doing or wanted to do for a long time, is to hire a counselor in Solid Ground on staff to provide mental and chemical health services to our residents. We have some great partnerships, but you know, more and more these issues are really prevalent among our clients, and our staff needs some more support in these areas, and having someone on staff to be able to provide that kind of consultation or direct service to our residents, we think is really going to make a difference in what we do. So I'm going to stop there. I have a couple more slides, but I just want to see if folks have any questions about what we plan to do.
Trisha, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Roger Funk. I work with Jeff on the homeless team, and or whatever we call it, Jeff, I can't remember. And my emphasis right now, or the project I'm working on, is Car Care Ministries. And my question to you is, when you support these people or talk to these people, do you screen them or have any questions, or do they fill out a form that item or need would be identified? Did you hear the question? Or did I freeze?
We might have lost her, it looks like.
Did you hear my question, Pastor Peter?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
It looks like we just lost Trisha for a moment. Hopefully she'll be able to come back. This is the time-space continuum question of Zoom.
Yeah, Roger, I do know, Roger, that Solid Ground uses a service called coordinated entry, which is something that's standardized between Ramsey and Washington County, and there is definitely a questionnaire that is administered to people that are coming into these programs. But it looks like Trisha is coming back, so hopefully she can say more specifically about that.
She back online?
I see her picture there. She's still muted. I see the emblem of Solid Ground, so she might just be having some connection issues.
Yep.
We always have to have one technical glitch to call it a good meeting.
That's right.
That's just the way it works.
At least one.
Well, I kind of figure maybe she didn't want to answer my question, so she just dropped out.
Diverting. They are experts in diversion. They are the local experts in diversion.
So Trisha, I don't know if you can hear us, but we see your screen with the Solid Ground emblem. and see that you're muted. That's what we see so far.
Hey, Jeff, do you have a copy of that coordinated entry form?
You're
Jeff,
muted.
you're muted.
I'm gonna mute him again.
Roger, so far my landlord has not kicked me out, so I have not had a need to fill one of those forms out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You're probably pretty close though.
It's a new year. There's new frustrations. It's building up. It's kind of tentative. So Roger, I might have an answer for you in a few weeks.
I kind of have a question for the group. And I just love that we've had so much great energy about housing and kind of the multifaceted way to approach it together. But I'm kind of curious about whether or not you all feel that whether housing is a fundamental human right. Or from a theological perspective, is there something about home that is inherent to being a child of God? And what then is our kind of role in that? While we wait for Trisha.
I would vote housing is a human right, basic human right, and it is so foundational to helping families and individuals survive and thrive. Housing first is sort of a mantra in this space.
Yeah.
In terms of keeping kids in schools, helping families keep their jobs, but coming at it from a human rights, a basic human right is, I think, is really a fundamental premise.
Well, it's, when you look at, what is it, Maslow's
Hierarchy. Yeah.
hierarchy?
Yep.
I mean, air, water, shelter,
Mm-hmm.
that order, before food even.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have shelter,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's so critical.
And how closely connected is belonging to that then too, if you're looking at that hierarchy, kind of home and belonging.
Well, and that's one thing that I wanted to ask her too, is that the whole idea of, and Renee, I know you were just working with a shelter, and shelters have a very important role in keeping people, from freezing and all sorts of things like that. But oftentimes you also hear people interviewed where they have the encampments, where they'll say, I don't want to go to a shelter because I feel safe here. We've created a little community that works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to me because physically, it's not the best place to be because, there's all sorts of things. And yet they have a sense of community. And this one guy talked about how we care for each other enough so that we feel safe together.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you address that? It's like you want to pick up that whole little community they've created and say, okay, now let's get you some permanency and let you have your community. So I don't know. Trisha, yay, welcome back.
Pastor Peter,
I am so sorry, you guys. I could hear you on my phone once I got in on my phone, but I couldn't figure out how to get the picture and
Did you hear Roger's question?
get off the phone after I got back on here. I clicked the right button.
So did you hear
I'm
Roger's
so sorry about
question?
that. But yeah, housing is a right.
Oh,
It's
So
I did not hear the question. I promise it wasn't you. It was my internet connection.
Yeah, I figured
What's your
you
question,
dropped
Rob?
it as soon as I asked the question, Trisha. But my question is, I work with Jeff on the homeless situation. And my question was this, is because I'm kind of working on Car Care Ministries. When they do the coordinated entry form with you, is there anywhere on your form or your entry process that you ask them about access to car, or if they have any problems with transportation and things like that?
We do, not as part of the coordinated entry process, but when someone's enrolled in our program, and then we're starting to get to know them and what kind of needs they have, that's when we would ask about transportation. Yeah. So, hopefully my coworkers know about the resources available in the community, including what you're working on, but it's not.
Okay. And when you do get to that
Something I
aspect,
don't think coordinated.
yeah,
entry is
Tricia,
a
when you
part
do
of.
get to that
And do
aspect.
folks know what we're talking about?
When you do get to that aspect,
Go ahead.
Tricia, about asking about car care or automobile transportation, are there services that you can offer them, or is it just a matter of here's public transportation that you can get to in case you don't have a car or your car is broken down?
Yeah. I would say the answer to that question is yes and no. So we have significant financial assistance available for our residents. But we also we don't provide assistance with their vehicles unless they have a valid driver's license and insurance. And so we can help them with that. But, to be honest, not everybody in our program has insurance or a valid license, but they're driving anyway. And so that's just an approach that we've taken to make sure that they're being safe. But we've helped many people with car repairs, with paying for insurance, maybe paying other things so that they can pay off fines if that's a barrier. But, in Washington County, public transportation is particularly limited. So when we're looking for housing for someone, we are paying attention to where else do they need to go. If they're working, can they get to work based on where they're living? Do they need to be near a bus line? Do they need to be near childcare? All of those things are factors that we take into account when we're searching for housing.
Okay, thank you.
I think John Hodler, I heard your voice as if you were going to make either a comment or have a question.
I was going to respond to Pastor Peter's question, if that's okay still, or is that
No, go ahead.
sequence? Here's my response to your question about, is housing a basic right or a basic right? What I think happens is I believe it's a fundamental building block for a good society, which is different than calling it a right. And the reason I say that is because given our current culture in society, we have so many arguments about who has a right and who doesn't have a right. So I like to frame it up in my mind that it's a basic building block for a good society. Just like I believe education, food, shelter is one of those basic building blocks that we have to have, and to frame it up that way. And so then I'll also put up just a brief plug for next week, if I can, Penny. You were talking about communities, and that's what next week's adult forum is about, sacred communities, and how there's different solutions for housing. And to get that community doesn't have to be in a shelter as we see it. It can be in other areas. So that's my response to your question, for what it's worth.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question they want to ask Trisha? Or Trisha, I didn't know if you wanted to go ahead on anything else at this time.
I've got one more
Okay.
if nobody else does, but I'm open to waiting too. Well, so Trisha, I'm curious about your thinking around the the difference between supply and demand of housing in our communities. Why is there so little supply and why is there so much demand?
There's several reasons. One is that the federal government kind of got out of the housing business back in the 1980s and turned it over to the private market, but the private market isn't meeting that demand because the rents need to be so low that there really need to be pretty deep subsidies to allow for very low income families or individuals to afford those rents. And at the same time, so housing costs is both, I think, a driver of the issue and a product of the issue. You know, it isn't getting built fast enough. And the housing costs have risen so much more than rental income. So, you know, people talk a lot about, oh, people's incomes have risen dramatically in the past couple decades. And for some, that's true. And for many, it's not. Renter income has actually decreased. There's this widening gap between housing costs and renter income. And I think the other part of the production problem with affordable housing is neighborhood, opposition. I mean, it doesn't take, a lot of thought to think of some different instances, probably in your own communities, depending on where you live, of neighbors rising up in opposition against multifamily housing. Here in Van Ness Heights, where I live, we've had a couple of large apartment buildings either be built or proposed to be built recently, and the opposition was just crazy. And those weren't even affordable units. I mean, those were like $2,000 a month rental units. But people don't like change, right? And there's a lot of stigma that comes with multifamily housing. And it's really unfortunate because I think that we're only perpetuating those problems when we deny people opportunities for safe, affordable housing, right? We are creating the problems that we think will be coming with affordable housing when we don't allow enough of it in our communities.
Thank you. It's helpful. And a big and helpful for me to hear, but unhelpful for where we're at, I guess.
Well, I think
Trisha, I have a question.
If I could, Jeff, just real quick, I think one of the best things that churches can do is bring members together to speak in favor of projects, right? That's one of the amazing things that you can do is when we went to expand our East Metro Place building back in the early 2000s, we had someone speak in favor for every person who got up and spoke in opposition of our project. And that was just an expansion. We already own the land, and we just wanted to fully develop it and bring more supportive units available. And we had a lot of opposition, but we just went with everyone. And, the city council, fortunately, was very much in favor of it. But, there are a lot of things that we can do, I think, to start moving the dial on this issue. And part of it is, making sure that your elected officials know that you care about this as an issue, that you expect resources in the state and in our local communities to go to this issue, and showing up at City Hall to speak in favor of it.
Go ahead, Jeff, with your question.
I think one thing that would be helpful to us, at least as sort of a definition thing, when you were talking about the grant money we're going to be having available, you said it's not to be used for prevention, but it could be used for diversion And both those words sound similar to me, but in the biz, there must be a definition that fits, that would help me understand why prevention is a bad thing and diversion is okay.
No, that is not, sorry, it looks like I'm losing my internet again. Can you guys hear me? Give me a thumbs up.
We hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry. You guys are all frozen, so I must be the one who's
It
actually.
might be easiest, Trisha, if you want to try not having your video on and just your audio.
Okay,
Let's try that and just see if it's a little bit more clear.
okay. So prevention is absolutely not a bad thing. I think that, but prevention and diversion are different things. And I think that the Day One Fund and their kind of tagline is "No child sleeps outside." So, you know, I think they recognize that there must be many other funders of prevention, and that they just want to direct their dollars more toward families who are already homeless. Solid Ground provides a continuum of services and housing. And so we believe in everything from prevention, right? Because prevention is the least expensive and in many ways the most effective intervention, because you are not only preventing someone's homelessness, but you are preventing all of the, or much of the trauma that comes with that, right? And for many families, they've already lost their house, right? They're already in shelter or bouncing around with family and friends or in their car or whatever the situation may be. So how can we end that quickly and get them into housing, whether it's their own housing or being, you know, with friends or family or some other situation that provides some stability to them. Because that's just a reality these days, is with the housing costs and incomes being what they are. Sometimes, you know, other cultures have generations of families living together all the time, right? But in America, we all have to be on our own. And if you're not on your own, there's something wrong with you. And that's not necessarily true, right? It's absolutely not true. You know, sometimes it's best to be together, as long as you're not overcrowded in that housing to the point of it being unsafe. You know, sometimes that just is the right solution. And what happens though is when families are in rental housing and they have other family members who need them, they are breaking their lease when they bring those people into their housing. And now you might have two families on the street because now that first family has lost their home as well. So it becomes complicated. But I recognize, you know, I have my own home. So if my sister lost her home, God forbid, she could come and stay with me. And nobody's gonna prevent that from happening. And vice versa, I could go to her if I lost my home. But you know, in Minnesota, we have the lowest home ownership among persons of color in the country. You know, so when we look at some of these other issues, you know, why are so many people experiencing homelessness, people of color? Well, it's a big, deep, broad issue. And, you know, there are a lot of different ways that we need to attack the problem if we're really going to overcome the situation that we're in.
Yeah, our Tuesday morning book group read a book called The Color of Law, which I would highly recommend. It's got a lot of information in it. I would recommend maybe trying to read it with someone else so you can have discussion and ask each other questions, just sometimes to clarify if you've understood it correctly. Because some of the things that you had mentioned, brought it to mind. You said the federal government had gotten out of the housing market. Part of me was going that might have been not all bad because of what kinds of things they did to keep people of color from ever owning housing or even renting. We have a very poor history of how that worked or didn't work, which probably also plays into why we have so few homeowners of color in Minnesota based on some of the practices actually here in Minnesota. Putting the highway through the Rondo neighborhood was just deliberately horrible in reducing that ability and breaking up a community. So anyway, I would just recommend to people, if you haven't, it's a bit of a weighty book, but it's well worth the read to even gain an understanding of when it comes to building and the private builders and how we set covenants and we set building requirements that really prohibit building affordable housing in areas where we could be.
Have people read that? Anybody? Yeah, Delzy, Marie, yeah.
My book group.
Yeah, you are both. We've talked about doing a Lenten series on that coming up. So that was brought to Pastor Chris about doing that book and kind of breaking it up so that we could have some more discussion groups about it. But I think I haven't read it either. So but yeah, it's Rothstein, right? Yeah, Richard Rothstein.
And it's a heavyweight book. Yeah, it's definitely, but well worth the read. And so I stop and think about what Solid Ground is trying to do, and the resources of what housing is available to work with. It must be very hard and limiting. And so as a church, when you mentioned that we need to speak in favor of projects, that really struck a chord with me of, okay, and then how do we do that? How do we, where do we do that?
Okay, I got to tag on to what you just said about churches speaking for housing. In my conversations and exposure to Washington County commissioners, they're very supportive of housing, but one in particular who represents the area we live in told me very bluntly that until the churches get behind this and publicly support it, it's not going to go anywhere. And what he was saying, commissioners are fine, but we can't do anything until the community supports it and the churches can be the leaders.
That's really good to know, John. And it also kind of sounds like it's something that as churches we need to work together on. Not just one church here, one church there, but another thing where we have to come together regardless of the denomination or whatever faction of church we are.
Well, Jeff Anderson is going to advocate for that at the St. Croix Valley Ministerium this Tuesday.
And John, are we still members of Isaiah? At one time,
We're Micah.
We're members of Micah. Okay.
But not Isaiah.
Does great work. I would absolutely encourage you guys to engage with them if you haven't already.
Micah or Isaiah?
Not Isaiah.
I'm
Micah.
not as familiar with Isaiah, but Micah, yes. You've got a chapter. They're having a legislative breakfast this week. Actually.
We're members of them, Teresa, and we try to become involved in their activities.
Great.
Yeah, that's this coming Wednesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So what do they do? Tell us.
John, Christy wants you to tell what Micah does.
Micah is the Metropolitan Interfaith Community Church Associated Housing, okay? And what they are primary is an advocacy group that works across the metro area, and Trisha, you can correct me as I go through this. Or across the metro area is where their base of activity is. Do a lot of advocacy work on policy for public housing, prevention of reduction of lead poisoning, trying to find funds. They're very broadly based in the housing arena. The executive director is Sue Phillips, and she's very dynamic, and she's also a president of one of the national housing associations. So Micah brings together different chapters. We're members of the Northeast Micah chapter. They have 3 or 4 chapters in the metro area, and they all reach out to different, have what they call legislative breakfast as one of their activities, where they bring in representatives, county commissioners, mayors, senators, etc., and advocate and present, have a one-on-one discussion and advocate for investment of the communities, state, local, county, and federal in resolving the housing crisis. Trisha, correct me where I went wrong.
Oh, no, that's a great description. Yeah, their primary focus is advocacy, and they do it, as John said, both at the state and the local level. So, you know, talking to communities about their consolidated plans, holding communities accountable for those housing and development plans and so forth. So, and it's a faith-based group, so it might be something that, you know, you all would be interested in.
Micah has spoken to us before in that same series that Trisha participated in October 2019. And one of the benefits that they provide, and they have a website which you can get to, it's micah.org. And I'm a little bashful about writing to my local elected officials, but they make it pretty easy. And if there's something coming up that's related to a funding bill or a bond issue or something statewide, you can go to their website and they'll provide you the letter. All you have to do is, you know, indicate your name and press send. And it seems a little impersonal, but it might get you started along the line of maybe showing up at a county housing meeting or a city zoning commission meeting or something in the future. So it takes time, but their website is very engaging. It gets you really fired up. So check it out and visit it, and I think you'll get a lot more information about what they do. And I think they, as much as anybody, will help with the supply issue that Trisha has referred to.
I want to be cognizant of time. So there's just a few minutes before noon. Trisha, was there anything else you would like to share with us?
I would just say that, you know, given the challenge of finding rental units that are affordable to families that we serve, you know, if you have rental property, if you know of someone who has rental property, let me know. Because I often, you know, will say, if someone asks me, do you need money or do you need a landlord? I'll take the landlord. You know, we need money too, right? Money, no mission. But there are about 20 to 25% of the folks that are referred to us in our scattered site housing programs never find housing. And that's unacceptable. Right? Sometimes it's because they fall out of touch with us, you know, they don't respond anymore, and it's hard to know what how their situation has changed or where they are. But, you know, even one person who can't find housing, even with our assistance, is too many. So spread the word and let us know if you have folks, landlords with rental properties. We'd love to connect with you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any last questions? And
sorry again for the technical problems.
No,
you know, if we don't have something, it's not a complete, Zoom meeting. It's just how it
Full
goes. Tricia.
experience.
But I appreciate so much how you've taken your time today to share with us what you are about again, and also what new things are coming. I think you've planted some seeds of some ways that we can continue to grow in helping in the ministry of housing, and some more ideas of ways to connect and move forward. Jeff, did you have any last things, or Pastor Peter?
No, I just wanted to thank Trisha for coming a second time to Stillwater, even though she's still in Vadnais Heights. We had a conversation earlier this week, and she said, because I said, look forward to seeing you on Sunday. She said, I'm not coming to Stillwater, am I? So, we have to be careful these days when we talk about seeing people. This is how we see people now. But anyway, we're very appreciative of you coming. I think you've given us a lot to mull over, and your website is solidgroundmn.org, so people can check that out if they missed some of the video that you weren't able to provide today. But looking forward to the next 3 weeks. Also, we're going to be looking at tiny homes. We're going to be looking at community engagement with regard to the sacred communities entering them. Once again, not in my backyard does get to be an issue there. And then also on the last Sunday of the month, we'll hear from Julie Jepson, who works with Washington County on our, I guess maybe it's a diversion thing with regard to having folks in hotels, which right now has been supported by CARES funds from the federal government. We've got a lot of things developing in that area, both in Washington County and beyond. So please tune in the next 3 Sundays as well. And thank you, Trisha, for being a big part of our month.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And just a little shout out to Jeff for being a great member of the Solid Ground Board of Directors and our incoming chair this spring. It's been a pleasure to work with him.
Look what retirement gets you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I
Thank you,
think we-
Trisha, and excited about the new programs that are coming up too.
Yeah.
I think
Thank
we
you.
as churches-
Blessings.
I think
Yeah,
we as-
Bye.
never mind.
Bye.
Bye.
What are you trying to say, Christy?
I think we as churches have our marching orders.
Yes.
The county won't do anything until we motivate. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day and a great
Happy
week.
Sunday,
And
everybody.
Yeah.
if anyone has more info that they want us to share, you know how to get a hold of me. So thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
All right.